Hey, what's up, guys? So, you're tuning in to a brand new YouTube channel. My goal with this channel is to become the #1 resource for fantasy hockey. And this is going to be starting with a video about what went on today at the draft. I'm going to be talking about all the trades that happened. All right, so the first trade I'm going to be talking about is the Montreal Columbus trade. Montreal dealt Max Domi and a third-round draft pick to Columbus for Josh Anderson. Now, a lot of people are saying, damn, that's a pretty bad trade for Montreal. Like, not only is Domi the better player, but we also gave a third-round draft pick. Yes. However, as a Habs fan, I actually don't think it's such a bad trade. Josh Anderson is actually a really, really good power forward, and there are not a lot of guys like him in the league right now. Finding a guy like him is actually really, really difficult. So to get a power forward as skilled and talented as he is, I'm pretty happy about it. Now, last year he only had 4 points in like 24 games. He was injured for the vast majority of the season, and the time he did spend, he was not fully healthy. So I'd like to see that. Hopefully, he plays the entire season. Hopefully, he's completely healthy, and hopefully, there's no issues. If he does, we know that he can put up almost 50 points in a season. We've seen it. So, getting a second or third line guy that's got some grit that can put up almost 50 points in a season, I don't mind that whatsoever. Now, had he actually played a complete season, even though he wasn't performing offensively, had he played that full 70, 71 games that everybody else did, he actually would have finished top 25 in the league in hits. So a guy who can actually produce offensively and can give you some hits and be a physical threat as well, I love me that in my lineup. Now, Domi is also really good for Columbus because they really needed some help down the middle. They're about to buy out Wenberg, and he's not that great anyway. So Domi is a perfect second line center for them. So I think the trade works out both for both teams. The reason Montreal traded him, because as a Canadiens fan myself, I love Max Domi. Don't get me wrong, I love him. He was fantastic 2 seasons ago, but the thing is, this year, unexpected things happened. Nick Suzuki, a prospect that we didn't expect to even make the NHL until this coming season, actually made the team. Not only that, but he actually excelled. He was really good. He was our second line center last year. So there's a lot of things that have been happening that made it so Max Domi doesn't really have a spot anymore. When we brought him in as a center. We turned him into a center. And then after that happened, these things happened that we didn't really have use for him anymore. To the point where in the playoffs last year, he was on the fourth line. He was centering the fourth line, and he doesn't belong on the fourth line. Kotkaniemi was drafted, and he actually didn't play much last year. That gave Domi a chance to be a centerman. And we actually bumped Kotkaniemi, a third overall pick, to the fourth line, which wasn't okay. He didn't do that great, and they actually dropped him to the minors, let him, improve his game a little bit there. And then in the playoffs, he came out and he looked fantastic. So next season, our top three centers are going to be Dano, Kotkaniemi, and Suzuki. There's no doubt about it. And the order is not set in stone yet, but those are our three top guys. So we can move Doman to the wing, but he has so much more value now that he's a centerman. Might as well get rid of him. Dano too is another guy who really developed, and he's looking like a top 5 defensive forward in the league. Like right after guys like Bergeron, Couturier, Kopitar. So this guy's looking great. He's got offensive firepower as well as that really, 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 really good defensive part to his game. He's a huge reason why the Habs even got past the Penguins. He kept Crosby's line in check. It was fantastic. He was really, really good. So that's what I think about that trade. The other trades that happened today are Ottawa Senators. They grabbed Matt Murray from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they gave up a second-round draft pick and a guy, Jonathan Gruden. I don't think Gruden's going to amount to anything, so let's just pretend it's Murray for a second rounder. And That's actually a pretty high price to pay in this market. I know and a lot of people might think, oh, Matt Murray for a second rounder, what a steal. Not really. There's so many goalies available right now. Like uh, Vegas, I know wants to deal Fleury. Uh, Vancouver right now, Markstrom's a free agent. Markstrom's a free agent. Grice is a free agent. Holtby's a free agent. Lundqvist is a free agent. There's so many goalies that are available right now. So many teams that want to deal goalies. Even right now, Khudobin's even a free agent. He looked fantastic in the playoffs. So there's so many goalies that are around. You know, the fact that Pittsburgh even got a second rounder for Murray says something. The reason they did that is because he has 2 Stanley Cups. That's the only reason they got a second rounder. As far as Pittsburgh is concerned, pretty good trade. You get a second round guy. They drafted a goalie, Blomqvist. He looks pretty good. So, we'll see in a few years how he turns out. And Pittsburgh now doesn't have the issue with 2 really, really good goalies. They now have Jarry as a bona fide #1 goalie. And DeSmith, he played a couple seasons ago. He was pretty good backup. So I have no issues there in Pittsburgh. So whatever games that Jarry doesn't start, DeSmith can handle, and he won't have any problems with it. He's a pretty good goalie. All right, so the next trade we're going to talk about is Nick Bonino from Nashville to Minnesota in exchange for Luke Kunin. I really like this trade, both ways actually. I think Minnesota loses that trade by a little bit, but they really need center depth. They kind of got rid of all their centers in one shot. They traded away Eric Stahl. They're not re-signing Mikko Koivu, and they traded away Donato. So who's left? Who's left down center in Minnesota? They have Eriksson Ek right now, who's positioned to be their #1 center, which is a little ridiculous in my opinion. They just drafted Marco Rossi, who actually could be NHL ready. We'll discuss that in another video, but they don't really have much center depth at all. They just got Bustad, but I see him as a 4th-line center if they even want him to play center. So they don't have a whole lot of options. So yeah, Kunin could play center, but they've kind of turned him into a winger, so it doesn't make sense to transition him back. So what they did was they traded him to Nashville in exchange for Nick Bonino. Nick Bonino is a really, really, really good 3rd-line center. He's good, very good defensively, and he actually's got some offensive talent as well. Like last year in Nashville, the guy had 35 points in 67 games. So that's more than a point every 2 games. So that's pretty good for your 3rd-line center. You have no issues bringing that into your team. Only thing is, Bonino's 32 years old. Kunin, he's 22. So there's a pretty significant age gap there. So so Kunin actually also had about the same stats last year. He had 31 points in 63 games. It's also about a point every 2nd game, but Kunin was kind of playing 3rd-line minutes, and this guy's got some real potential. This guy can become a really good player depending where Nashville decides to put him. So closer to the start of the season, I'm gonna make a projected lineup for Nashville and see where he falls in. I'm gonna look at him in training camp and see how he looks, because this guy could actually be a really good fantasy player next season. We'll see. Depends how Nashville decides to use him. Really depends, because he's got a lot of potential. Bonino, I wouldn't draft him in any leagues, but he's going to be a pretty good 3rd-liner. Not much more than that. You can use him, and you can pick him up for a couple games here and there if Nashville has a favorable schedule, but I wouldn't draft Bonino. All right, so the next trade that happened today was the Rangers trading Elias Anderson to the LA Kings in exchange for their 2nd-round draft pick. With that draft pick, the Rangers selected Will Queel. Now, I'm not going to comment on Will Queel because we don't know how he's going to turn out in a year or two. Could be a really good trade for them. However, Elias Anderson was a 7th overall pick just 3 years ago. This guy can still pan out. Now, he did not do well at all for the Rangers or for their AHL team, the Hartford Wolfpack. He has not been that great. However, last season he went over to Sweden to play in the SHL, and he was almost a point per game. He scored 12 points in 15 games. And this year, so far, he's got 4 points in 4 games. He's looking a lot better. And who knows? Maybe next year he'll actually play. He'll live up to his potential. As a 7th overall pick. So you don't know. The Rangers were like, we don't care. They traded him away for a 2nd round pick. Hopefully it's worth it for them. But I think that this guy can really pan out in LA because LA's got a lot of young developing guys, and they're not afraid to give these young guys. I don't think they'll be afraid to give these young guys a lot of ice time next year. I think LA is going to look really, really good next year with a lot of young guys and a lot of young talent. So I don't think they'll be afraid to showcase that, and I think Elias Anderson will have more than enough opportunities to prove himself. So really good trade for LA in my opinion. Really, honestly, I'm really happy for them. In other news, Jesse Puljujarvi re-signed with the Oilers after spending a whole year in Finland, and he's looking a whole lot better. In Finland, he was a point per game. He got 53 points in 56 games in the SM Liga. It's pretty good. He's playing there right now until probably the season resumes, so he's going to get even more experience there, going to develop even more. I think he'll have a pretty decent season in the NHL. So we'll have to look and see how he does, but he might be worth drafting in fantasy. All right, the last 2 significant moves that happened today was Dylan DeMelo being re-signed by the Winnipeg Jets. There's not a whole lot of fantasy relevance there, but it definitely helps their blue line. It'll help them keep some pucks out of their net. So pretty good signing. So the second thing that happened today was Nashville actually buying out Kyle Turris. And I don't think anybody saw that one coming. Yeah, he's getting paid way too much for what he's delivering, but he's not that bad. And so it's a little bit strange, and it's a little bit, it makes you a little curious. Like, what's going to happen with Turris now? Are they doing it just so they could resign him at a cheaper price, or is he going to hit the free agent market? If he does, I'm sure there's going to be quite a few teams interested in him, and they'll give him probably a bigger role than Nashville did. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens with his fantasy value, depending on where he lands. All right, last but not least, guys, I want to thank all of you for watching the video all the way through. Really appreciate it, and I want you guys to leave comments down below because I want to know how I did, how I could improve. If you want more information, less information, if I should go through a little bit more things that happened or not, let me know. I'd love your input, and I'll definitely listen.